Hello, hello. Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about how to incentivize your team without it backfiring. You're going to learn, well, hey, what can go wrong if you're too generous with your employees? We're discussing the number one problem in a CEO's mindset that creates confusion with your team. And I'm going to give you 3 action items to use today to increase productivity and morale on your team. Now, let's take a second and look at the number one problem that I see in a CEO's mindset that is creating this ineffectiveness with your team. And I see this a lot with CEOs. We have this tendency as human beings to see our own life's experience and then project it onto other people. And if there's one thing I know about CEOs is they are unique. You're different. You see the world in a very different way. That is not to say that other people are less than or dumb or insignificant. It's just your perspective is very different. So when you make the assumption that what you are seeing and what is so obvious to you, and you project it onto your team members, people who don't have the wisdom of experience of building the company, like you do, by the way, when you project that onto your team, you will find yourself constantly being frustrated because it's so obvious and you're not going to treat them like some dumb idiot who can't see what's so obviously right in front of them. And so there's no way that you're going to point it out. You wouldn't point out the obvious because if somebody pointed out the obvious to you, well, that's irritating. That's frustrating. And so we take this perspective that we have as the owner, as the founder, who, by the way, has way more information than your team members. And we project it onto them. And we're so frustrated that they're not taking action. So, in order to actively incentivize your team, we need to first acknowledge the projections that you're putting onto them. We're not actually setting them up for success. So, we have to change that. Part of what happens with a projection is you assume their level of responsibility and accountability. And you assume that what would motivate, light up, excite you is similar for your team members. That simply is not true. I work with a world renowned surgeon. He's got a medical office. And very quickly, we could see that his team was ungrateful, entitled, and unmotivated. And it was really frustrating to him and baffling to him because this is an individual who had to overcome war as a young child, who had to overcome so much unknown in front of him just to get to where he is in the medical industry and to become an incredible surgeon. And so what he's doing is projecting these skills of radical self accountability. He's projecting them onto his team members, and he's a generous individual. And that generosity was not tied to performance. And this is the key here. He was being extremely generous because that is who he is. But the generosity was creating entitlement, and it was actually disempowering his team, disincentivizing his team to perform because, hey, I don't have to push a little bit harder. I don't have to go beyond the comforts of what I'm currently doing in my job because the generous doctor is going to take care of me. And without realizing it, he was creating this perspective and this mindset with his team. And so he was walking around with frustration that there was this entitlement. And the team was walking around with the entitlement thinking, well, the generous doctor needs to open his pocketbook a little bit more. That was creating tension and frustration for the whole team. Part of it was there was this kind of flat profit sharing, and it was equal amongst the team. They had mistakenly thought that they needed to avoid competition that can happen when the profit sharing is connected to the actual revenue and dollars that they're creating inside of the organization. And we need that competition. It's healthy. And so we have shifted this kind of general profit sharing. We have shifted it and very specifically tied it to each team member's performance. Part of what they were avoiding was the fact that not each team member is directly affecting revenue. That's not totally true. And there are team members who can be watching and very careful about how we're spending the resources within the office. And so if you're saving the office X amount of dollars, well, that's increasing profitability. And so in that way, that is how those team members are affecting revenue and profitability. And so it's not exciting, it's not fun, it's not glamorous, but we had to sit down with the operator and build out a spreadsheet and look at each individual team member, the areas of responsibility that they carry within that position, the ways in which they can potentially influence profitability, revenue, even customer satisfaction. And then we have very specifically been working with the different teams to make sure that they have the training that they need, that they actually have the words to create people into new products and services, and making sure that not only are the incentives aligned, but that team members have the training that they need to be successful. I can think of another client who we were talking about something similar that was happening for him and his team and his organization. Similarly, very generous individual. And he was saddened and kind of baffled, actually, to see how frequently people were ungrateful for his generosity. Again, it wasn't tied to anything that they were doing. And so they couldn't actually affect it. And so we saw the wake of destruction, the disappointment that created for him personally, and even the friction it was creating in partnerships and with team members. And so we had to clean house. It's really uncomfortable. It's not glamorous, but we've reset things, and his team is working and performing way better. And as we were having these conversations, he realized he was doing the same thing in his home with his children. And there was this inconsistency with dad's generosity, and it wasn't tied to anything. Meaning, just at random, hey kids, let's go to the gas station and get treats and snacks. It was happening way too much. And kids were not doing and carrying enough responsibility in the home. And maybe this is revealing my perspective on a family. Kids want to work. They actually want to contribute. I know they push back. Believe me, they push back. They push back their whole life. They will. That's part of their job. Our job is to create a family that is working together and shouldering responsibilities together. So once he saw that, not only did he start creating performance agreements with team members, but he brought it to his home and he asked each of the kids, like, let's create job charts. And I have a whole podcast I should do on that, actually. But they started to define the different responsibilities in the home, and given their ages and capabilities, what are the responsibilities that the 13-year-old could carry, that the 11-year-old could carry, that the 7-year-old could carry. They have divvied those up. The kids have charts. They are now marking their charts. And what does this do on the other side of it? It creates gratitude, creates motivation. It gets rid of the entitlement. And we then become a team working together, shouldering responsibilities together. And ultimately, we are able to accomplish and achieve the goals and the outcomes in an empowered way. So, first, we need to see that you're projecting things onto your employees, your team members, and you are not them and they are not you. And so we need to align incentives and connect them to their responsibilities and then their kind of compensation or payout reward to that thing. Okay. Principle number 2, and this one, some CEOs tend to people please and don't want to be the bad guy. This is going to make me laugh. I immediately am thinking of an incredible entrepreneur. What do I want to call him? Peter. He out of New York. He's in the mortgage industry, age wise, probably about 55. And he couldn't even call himself a boss because, well, a boss is a bad guy and he's a mean guy and he comes down on everybody. And what was also happening is his team didn't know who to look to. And so he was avoiding that label of being the boss and being the person in charge because in his life's experience, that was never a guy that people admired and could trust. I don't know if that came through books and movies or actual personal experiences, but he had written some story in his mind that the boss is the bad guy and therefore I'm just one of you guys. But his team was really lacking that leadership. And similar to what I was saying in principle number 1, he was just constantly frustrated with them, but he didn't want to be the bad guy. So he would push down that frustration, push down the irritation and, put on the stewardess smile, which is what we call it in our family, where you're like clearly not happy, but the cheeks of your mouth are definitely going up. The corners of your mouth are going up. And he was just kind of he was walking around with this potential volcano explosion, but just constantly pushing it down. So your opportunity is to really first recognize and acknowledge that actually what we want to do is empower the team and give them that leadership that they want and need. So how can you do this? It's not complicated. One, you have to take up the stick of responsibility of leadership, the fact that you're the captain of this ship and people are relying on you to be that leader. And it doesn't mean you're a bad guy. It doesn't mean you're oppressive or tyrannical. In fact, you have a chance to redefine what it means to be a boss. You have a chance to redefine what it means to be the captain of the ship. And you can show up powerfully in a new way with your team and not be that oppressive person who is disrespectful, demanding, and all of the non-powerful things that maybe you've associated with the CEO. So first, you got to create that position within your head and in your heart who you actually want to be. And then there's some really tactical things that we need to do to ensure that you are having this communication with your team, that you're powerfully leading them, that they have the clarity and the training and the things that they need to be effective in their position. So the first is having regular check-ins with your team members, asking questions from a place of curiosity, digging a little bit deeper, going beyond the surface and just getting a little bit deeper, not as a way to kind of expose them, but you really want to understand what's happening in their role, in their position, and the people they're connected to. And maybe if they're a manager, even the people that they're leading. So you can really understand that piece of the business and their area of responsibility. And then we need to, once we've done that regular check-in, then we need to be doing reviews. And there's a time and a space to kind of take in all of the information. And then there's a new time and space to give feedback and better direction. And so that would look like reviews, where you are doing these regular check-ins, making sure that we are in agreement on their roles and responsibilities, that's clearly defined, and then doing reviews. Quick question for you. What would happen in your business and life if you could show up powerfully? As a coach to high-performing entrepreneurs, I help intelligent people like you do just that. And if you want to be inspired by people who are getting more done in 90 days than most people do all year, I'm going to invite you to go check out my case studies. The website is now.katierichardson.com/case study. And the cool thing is we've got so many case studies there. You can find an entrepreneur who's just like you. I've also got a link for you down in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. My client who has the medical office, some of his employees are people who have been on his team for a really long time, 7, 8, 9 years. And what can happen over time is a role and the responsibility with those roles can evolve. And the problem is if we don't update the definition of a role and the responsibility associated with that, what can happen is expectations creep in, which often are not fully communicated and not fully defined. And then we can have this frustration with team members because they're kind of expecting one thing. Maybe they're going back to the original expectation, the original standard and requirements for their roles and position. But you're seeing how the role has evolved, but we haven't updated the role. And so specifically, I saw this in my medical office. What was interesting is the CEO had one expectation for a team member. The operator had a different expectation. And what we realized as we were talking with each other is there was misalignment from the leadership team. And so the employee, I had a conversation with the employee, he actually had tremendous confusion. Of course he did. He actually didn't know he had confusion. I identified the dysfunction of this dynamic, and it was great once the CEO and the operator could see that they were not in alignment on what they were requesting of the employee and that it was time to update the responsibility of that position and then have a conversation and have that team member opt into these requirements that have evolved over the year. And so for months, everybody, there was like this three-way frustration. And now that we have clarity on the dynamic, we have clarity on what was happening, we have clarity on the ambiguity of his role and responsibility and how it's evolved. Well, now it's been a really simple process of getting alignment between the CEO and the operator, defining the role and responsibility of the team member, and then the team member now has a chance to say, yes, I will do those things. And that is the requirement and role of my responsibility. So that all got exposed, by the way, by having these regular check-ins and reviewing. And I'm going to also add having an outside perspective from the coaching that I'm doing with the CEO and the operator. That's where we expose that information. So we need to be doing regular check-ins and reviews so that we can expose the dysfunction and then create a system and a process to have everybody in agreement. Principle number 3 is hard to create desire in your team. So we need to tap into their already existing desires. Creating desire within somebody is really hard. It is. And the more powerful thing to do is to understand what somebody already wants. And if you can take the needs of the company and the things specifically you're needing from your employees, and you can build a bridge between what they already want and the things that the company needs and requires of them. If you can connect those things, desire shows up. And you don't have to push somebody externally because they are motivated from the inside out. This is at the core of what I do with clients in creating a compass sketch. It's at the core of why something like a North Star is so powerful. It's connecting to your internal desire, that burning fire that you already have. And so you don't have to create, I don't know, hyper discipline and motivation externally. It's coming from inside. I can share some really tangible examples from team members that I have had on both my physical products business and my current team members. You need to know the people on your team. We need to know what they're already oriented towards, what they already want. What's interesting is as this medical office was noticing a team member who performed really well in some areas, but just was really dropping the ball in other areas. And he was really baffled why that was happening. And so that's when I said, well, let's uncover this. Why don't I hop on the phone with him and have a conversation? Because I said, what does he want? And my client said, I don't know. I got on the phone with him and he said, Katie, I already have what I want. I just want to do my work and be there for my kids. It was pretty simple. And so to go back to what I was talking about with principle number 2, he thought he was doing his job because he was delivering on the first agreement, the first list of requirements for his position originally. But that had evolved, but there hadn't been an acknowledgement of that evolution. And so once his position was redefined and he saw how now there is some requirements of him in his position that just make him better at what he does, by the way. And it helps him get what he wants, which is to perform really well, aka give incredible patient care and be there for his kids. Now we can attach this expanded list of requirements and better care and better performance at work. It just becomes effortless because it's connected with what he wants. It allows him to perform really well at work and then go home and be present with his kids at dinner, go to the games, support them in their schoolwork. It's all from this place of what he already wants. I can think of another team member who was not necessarily motivated by money. That's kind of rare, actually. Most kind of entry level employees are very motivated by money. And I don't think that's bad. I say utilize that, incentivize them in any ways that you can, give them a percentage of their revenue increase, reward them for performing. But this team member, she specifically really loved date night with her husband or being pampered, but that was hard for her to do on her own. And so one of the ways that we would reward her is with, gift cards to a massage. And then that way we've done the thing that she really, really wants, but it's hard for her to do for herself. And the money had already been spent on the massage. We would book the appointment and gave her the gift card. So it was just all taken care of. That meant the world to her. Or we would buy gift cards to her favorite restaurant, a place that was just such a splurge in her mind. And her husband would go have date night. So, really paying attention to your team members, listening to what matters to them, understanding what is meaningful and motivates them, and then creating a connection between their work and the responsibilities and the outcomes that you're needing from them, connecting that to a very specific reward. And then making sure you really celebrate and acknowledge them. I remember there were moments in my physical products company where it just felt like it was all hands on deck, and sharing some of that with the team, and it really rallied people. And what was awesome is Lisa was my Amazon person, and she like really dug deep into better understanding Amazon and the ranking system and how she could optimize us and our listings so that we would rank the highest, which, by the way, she became a master at it. And we were consistently a top performer on Amazon in our categories. And that's something that it's like this virtuous cycle that continually spins upwards. If you can get in that position, then it amplifies your sales. And so we wanted to really incentivize that. So that meant that she was getting these bonuses, and we made sure to acknowledge her and give her these bonuses in front of her peers. And what it does is it incentivizes team members to also do that in their area of expertise and dig into how can I create efficiencies in the warehouse, or how can I create better efficiencies with our retailers and our wholesale accounts. So making sure that you celebrate and appreciate people as you look for ways to connect with their current desires and make a connection between what they're already desiring and the responsibilities of their job. Make a connection there, build a bridge, help them see how it's related and connected, and then make sure there's a very specific, tangible reward for when you accomplish X, you get Y. And Y is that thing they already really, really want. And then you just have to get out of their way. You just have to get out of their way. These are 3 really powerful principles for how to motivate your team, align them. This is how you can even be generous with your team, but in a way where it doesn't backfire. There's going to be an episode coming up soon where I had a conversation with a CEO recently, and he just had it. He had it. He was having to manage and do the work of so many of his team members, and he was super frustrated. And it was a beautiful moment because that meant he was ready to do the work to empower them. And I'm really excited to share those stories. There's some really funny things that he was making assumptions, and we'll go into that. But this is a chance for you to look at your team. How are you currently incentivizing them? Where are those incentivizations backfiring, and how can we adjust them so that we are empowering people and not entitling them? That's the whole objective here. I believe that when we set these things up in the quote right way, we just have to get out of people's way because we're already accessing their current motivation and their current internal desire. And we're just showing them how to get what they already want. And that is the secret. That's the key. And that's what I would invite you to do today. So take a minute, journal, get real, get honest, and look at maybe how you are dysfunctional as a team and start asking the questions, how can I empower my team? How can I powerfully incentivize the team where it's not backfiring? That's your opportunity. And of course, if you are feeling like you really painted into a corner and that this kind of backfiring ingratitude, entitlement is all over the place in your organization, reach out to me and my team. We have multiple ways that we can help and support you in navigating this. I want you to know that you can flip this on its head and create huge change in your organization in a short amount of time, and you immediately start to see results. And the change starts with you. That is what is working now. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to the What's Working Now podcast. If you found today's episode to be interesting, be sure to share this with a friend. And if you are looking to level up your organization as a CEO, I'm going to invite you to join the Now newsletter. This is a weekly newsletter. I send it out on Fridays. I tell personal stories, talk about what it's like to build a significant business while raising a family, homeschooling kids. And I even share case studies, very timely, relevant situations where I go into detail how I am helping entrepreneurs navigate, lead, and build incredible organizations. You can get all of that behind the scenes information and more inside the Now newsletter. I've got a link to it right now in the show notes, and I will see you in the next episode.